The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It slid down the window in long, trembling lines, turning the city into a watercolor of headlights and ghosts. Inside her small apartment, Amara sat cross-legged on the floor, phone glowing in her hand, its cracked screen reflecting her eyes like a broken mirror. The sound of each droplet against the glass was soft enough to be mistaken for breathing. She had spent hours deleting things. Old photos, half-written drafts, messages that once meant love, but now felt like wounds she kept reopening. Every text was a ghost she was finally willing to bury, until she reached that thread, the one that began the night she forgot how easily a mistake could become a sentence. Her thumb hovered over the screen. A single message blinked up at her, faintly lit beneath the spiderweb crack. I didn't mean to send that. Her throat tightened. That was how it started. A text meant for someone else, sent in exhaustion, in the middle of a thunderstorm, and answered by a man who should never have known her name. She whispered to herself, as if confessing to the dark, if I hadn't pressed send, would he still have found me? The rain answered with silence. She selected the chat, held down, pressed delete conversation. The phone asked, "Are you sure?" She wasn't. But she pressed yes anyway. Outside, lightning flared pale gold across the sky, and for an instant, her reflection vanished from the glass, leaving only the city, faceless and alive. Her voice, low and steady, almost prayer-like, rose through the quiet. That night, a single message made me belong to someone I'd never met, and it took everything I was to take myself back. The light flickered. The screen dimmed, and the story began where all mistakes do, in the space between loneliness and courage. Morning light spilled through thin curtains, soft as milk. Amara Okafor sat at her thrifted desk, editing a company's social media banners on an old laptop that wheezed like it needed prayer. The neighborhood hummed outside, vendors shouting prices, bike horns, gospel radio from somewhere above the ceiling. To everyone else, it was just another Tuesday. To her, it was another day of keeping her life from collapsing. Her mother's medical bills lay half-paid on the table beside a cup of cold coffee. Each invoice looked like a quiet threat. We haven't forgotten. She adjusted her headphones, trying to drown the world in lo-fi beats, but the worry kept leaking through the melody. Bills, deadlines. Silence from the man she once thought loved her. His name was Tunda, charming, half-present, quick to promise, quicker to vanish. He'd been gone 2 weeks now. She still caught herself rereading their old chats, tracing his last good night like scripture. Then she hated herself for it. So she opened a new message box, thumb trembling with anger. You disappear, then come back when you're bored. I'm not furniture you keep in storage, Tunde. She stared at the words, breathing hard. Her thumb brushed sent a blank. Then dread. The name at the top wasn't Tundi. It was a foreign number, one she didn't recognize. A Lagos country code, followed by digits too clean, too deliberate, like a number you'd only dial once. Her stomach dropped. She deleted the message, heart pounding. Too late. The phone buzzed almost instantly. A reply. Who are you to speak like that to me? Amara froze. The text felt cold, precise. No emojis, no name, just authority. She typed back, half embarrassed, half annoyed. Sorry, wrong number. Another buzz. No mistake is ever really wrong. It's just fate in disguise. She frowned, staring at the screen. Who texts like that? She laughed it off, muted the number, and turned back to her work. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the lagoon. Inside, her laptop battery died. The room fell silent except for the soft tick of the wall clock, counting down to something she couldn't yet name. Later that evening, while washing dishes, she caught herself checking the phone again. No new messages. Relief, maybe, or disappointment. When she finally crawled into bed, Lagos rain began to whisper against the windows again. She pulled the blanket close and whispered to herself, half asleep, tomorrow I'll forget about it. But the city had already decided otherwise. Down in the street, a black car idled under the rain, engine running, headlights off. Inside, a man looked at his phone, at her accidental message, and smiled. The next morning smelled of wet earth and diesel. Amara woke to a soft chime on her phone, an unknown number lighting the dark. "Good morning, Amara." Her heart stuttered. She hadn't given her name. She scrolled back to check if she'd signed any message. Nothing. Her breath fogged the phone screen. She typed, "Who is this?" No answer for a minute. Then, "Someone who listens when you speak." She almost laughed, until another notification came in. A photo, taken from the street below her apartment. Her window. Same curtains. Same angle. Her laughter died. She dropped the phone, pulse hammering, and yanked the curtain shut. Outside, rain fell again, thicker, as if the sky was eavesdropping. 10 minutes later, her doorbell rang. She stood frozen. A muffled voice called her name. Polite, accented, foreign. A delivery for Miss Amara Okafor. She cracked the door only wide enough to see a courier in a wet black jacket holding a bouquet of white lilies wrapped in brown paper. He handed her a card and vanished back into the rain. The card carried no sender's name, only a printed line. Her own words. "I'm not furniture you keep in storage." Her throat went dry. She set the bouquet on the counter as if it were dangerous. The lilies glistened like they were sweating fear. Her phone vibrated again. "You sound like someone who doesn't know her worth." "I could teach you," she typed back before she could think. "Stop messaging me." Another ping, then stop replying. Silence after that. The kind that isn't peace, just waiting. That night, she dreamt of footsteps echoing through water, of a man's shadow standing at her door. When she woke, her phone showed 10 missed calls, all from the same number. And one voicemail, his voice calm, assured, unmistakably foreign. "I like your courage, Amara. I like mistakes." They revealed truth. She deleted it, heart in her throat. But deletion didn't help. The next morning, an email from an unlisted sender landed in her inbox. An offer for a private design contract, large payment upfront, meeting location provided. The signature, D. Moretti. Her finger hovered over the delete key again, trembling. Instead, she whispered to herself, just one meeting, to tell him to stop. Outside, thunder rolled like distant applause. Inside, the clock on her wall ticked louder, counting down to the first time she would see the man whose name she should never have known. The restaurant was the kind that seemed to exist outside Lagos time. Dark marble, low jazz, a waiter who spoke softly enough to make secrets sound expensive. Amara had never been there before. She told herself it was only a meeting, that she'd take the contract, refuse politely, and go home. She wore a simple black dress that wasn't meant to impress anyone. Still, the mirror caught the tremor in her hands when she tied her hair. Her cracked phone screen blinked with the address he'd sent. It felt like stepping into another world, one she wasn't sure wanted her back. A tall man stood when she entered, the kind of tall that made space obey. Gray suit, open collar, eyes the color of wet steel. He didn't smile, but something about him, stillness maybe, pulled the air toward him. "Amara," he said, voice low, Italian vowels wrapped around her name. "You came." She sat because standing felt impossible. He gestured, and the waiter vanished as if trained to read danger. "You shouldn't have sent that message," Dante Moretti said, "but I'm glad you did." She tried to sound steady. It was a mistake. Everything worth knowing starts with one. He poured her water, not wine. No questions about work, only about her, where she lived, what she wanted, what frightened her. The way he spoke felt like being examined, not violated, but studied. "Do you always control people this way?" she asked finally. He leaned back. "Control? No, I simply see what belongs to me." She almost laughed, but his eyes stopped her. They weren't cruel, just certain. She looked down at her hands. The cracked phone rested on the table between them like a confession. "I don't belong to anyone," she said softly. He smiled then, brief and dangerous. "We'll see." Dinner passed like a test she didn't know the answers to. He never touched her, never raised his voice. But when she left, he handed her an envelope. Inside, the advance payment for the so-called design job. "I pay in full," he said. "I expect the same honesty." Outside, rain started again. Her reflection in the restaurant's glass looked blurred, half missing, as if she were already fading from herself. That night she couldn't sleep. The sound of his voice replayed between thunderclaps. Every word had weight, as if he had placed invisible strings on her and now tested how far they could pull. She told herself she hated him. But the truth was crueler. For the first time in years, someone had looked straight through her defenses. It felt wrong and alive. She opened her sketchbook, meaning to work, and instead drew eyes. Gray eyes, a mouth that never smiled but always almost did. She shut the book in shame. At 2 a.m. her phone buzzed. Dante, did you lock your door? Amara, how would you know if I didn't? Dante, because I'd already be inside. She threw the phone aside, heart racing, half fear, half something else. When she finally slept, she dreamed of a house by the sea, golden light pouring through tall windows, and Dante waiting there with an outstretched hand. Days blurred. He sent small gifts, coffee beans from Italy, a silk scarf the color of stormlight. Each came with a card. To remind you that I remember. Her friend Chica noticed. This isn't romance. Amara. It's surveillance. He hasn't hurt me, Amara said. Not yet. But when Amara checked her phone later, another text waited. Your friend worries too much. She felt the floor tilt under her. How did he know what Chica said? She almost confronted him, almost blocked him, but didn't, because mixed inside the fear was an ache she couldn't name. The ache of being noticed, even if it burned. Her narration softened into guilt. Maybe I kept answering because silence felt lonelier than danger. The rain outside kept time with her heartbeat, each drop a quiet admission. She knew she should end it. Instead, she whispered to the empty room, just one more message, and she sent him another text. The first calls felt like coincidence. Then her clients stopped replying, one after another. Their messages polite in the way people are when they're afraid of something larger than gossip. It didn't take long for Amara to realize the silence had a name. Chica noticed before she did. Say it out loud, her friend demanded over coffee. Amara whispered, Dante, the investor, the man from the messages. Chica's face hardened. You know what people say he is, Amara exhaled. Rumors don't pay hospital bills. There's help, Chica said softly. And there's a leash. That night, Rain returned, steady, watchful. A courier came to her door, soaked and polite, handing over a velvet box and an envelope. Inside the envelope, her mother's hospital balance sheet, stamped paid in full. Inside the box, a key card edged in gold and a note, a place where the rain won't reach you. Gratitude tangled with dread. She told herself she'd only go to thank him, to end whatever this was. The estate gate opened without a question. Pale lights traced the driveway through palm shadows. Dante waited beneath the portico, rain sliding off his shoulders like he was immune to weather. You came, he said. You paid my mother's bills. I don't like debts, he replied. Now neither of us owes. He led her inside, a house made of quiet and precision, white walls, glass that hummed with the sea's breath, art that looked like stillness framed. The air smelled expensive and wrong. You'll stay until things calm down, he said. I'm not staying. You arrived in a storm. He gestured toward the windows. No driver should risk the road. He paused. You're safe here. She caught the irony, but not the courage to name it. The room he showed her was flawless. Linen like cloud, cedar scent, ocean view. There was a phone beside the bed, and her own cracked one on the table. There was no lock on the inside of the door. That detail wouldn't leave her. She didn't sleep. The house breathed differently from a home. Every sound, air conditioning, waves, the soft tick of a clock, felt choreographed. When he knocked at dawn, she froze. You didn't eat, he said. I wasn't hungry. You should keep your strength. For what? For staying, he said, and left. By afternoon, a security consultant arrived to manage her exposure. He spoke gently, listing steps, close social accounts, limit contacts, avoid gossip. Friends, he added, are vulnerabilities. Amara closed the door on him and tried to remember the last time she'd chosen anything. The next morning, she called Chica. Voicemail. She left a message that sounded almost calm. "It's fine. I'm fine." A lie that tasted like metal. The city outside began treating her like a rumor. A blog photo of her entering a black car spread across feeds. The comments wrote a story for her. Strangers called her the boss's girl, the lucky one, the fool. Dante called that evening. "Don't look at noise," he said. "Let me protect you." "From what?" He hesitated. "From men like me." The words unsettled her more than threats ever could. After he hung up, she walked the corridor to the main door. Smooth glass, dark like water. She tried the handle. It didn't move. A sensor blinked red on the outside, access only for returning guests. From within, there was nothing. She pressed her palm to the glass. Outside, the night pressed its palm back. A house with no keys. That evening, she opened her phone's notes app and began to write, fingers trembling but sure. Control wears a suit, but it's still a chain. When did I learn to confuse safety with love? She pinned the note to the top of the screen. A small rebellion. Later, Dante appeared again, fatigue tracing his features. "You look like the rain found you," he said. "It lives here." He studied her. "Tomorrow you'll come to dinner. There's a meeting. A meeting for what we pretend is my job, for what protects you." He didn't wait for her answer. When he left, she packed quietly. Not much. Phone, sketchbook, one dress, the courage she could fit between breaths. Then she typed 3 words into a new message. Leave at dawn. She scheduled it to send to herself at 5:12 a.m., the moment when the sky forgives night for existing. Sliding the phone beneath her pillow, she lay back and listened to the house. It sounded like patience dressed as love. The rain outside applauded her decision in whispers she barely dared to believe. The storm stopped before dawn, leaving the air heavy and colorless. Amara woke to her scheduled text blinking on the screen. Leave at dawn. For a moment, she couldn't remember writing it. Then memory came back like breath after drowning. She dressed quietly, slid the tote over her shoulder, and opened the door. The hallway lights had dimmed to a sleepy amber. Somewhere beyond the glass, gulls were crying, and the sea answered like it pitied them. She was 3 steps from the main exit when a voice behind her said, "Going somewhere?" Dante stood in the corridor, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, holding 2 coffee cups. He looked calm. Too calm. "It's early," he said. "You'll get lost." "Maybe that's the point," she replied. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You'd rather wander than stay safe?" "Safe isn't freedom." He set the cups down and approached until she could smell the faint spice of his cologne. "You think I'm your enemy. I think you don't know the difference between care and control." For a second his eyes flickered. Hurt. Surprise. Then the mask returned. "You're shaking." "Because I'm finally saying what I mean." He stepped aside, opening the path to the door. "Then say the rest." She didn't move. The gesture felt too easy, rehearsed. Through the window behind him she saw men on the lower terrace. Security, smoking, pretending not to watch. Freedom was a word here. Not an option, she whispered. "This house doesn't need locks. It has eyes." He turned toward the sea. "Every empire does." Something inside her snapped. Not loud, more like silk tearing. "Empires fall," she said. "People just stop kneeling." He faced her again, and for the first time, his voice wasn't steady. "Do you think I built this to hurt you?" "No," she said. "You built it so no one could leave you." Silence swelled between them, heavy and electric. A power outage swept the hallway. The lights cut, plunging them into shadow. Outside, the horizon flashed silver, lightning tracing the curve of the ocean. In that half-second of brightness, she saw their reflections on the glass, his figure looming, hers smaller, both framed in the same cage of light. When darkness returned, she understood everything. Later that evening, After hours of stillness neither of them could name, the generator coughed the house back to life. She found him in his study, speaking in a low, vicious Italian to someone on the phone. He didn't notice her at first. "Everything I own stays loyal," he said. The sentence cut clean through her. He turned, startled, saw her standing in the doorway. The look on his face, the sudden realization of what she'd heard, was the last thread snapping. Amara's voice came out quiet, almost kind. "Then I should stop pretending to be one of your things." She set the tote on the table, reached inside and pulled out her cracked phone. The screen was still fractured, but it worked. She opened the draft she'd written days ago, the one about control and chains, and read it aloud. Each word sounded truer than the last. "When did I learn to confuse safety with love?" He said nothing. For the first time, Dante Moretti had no answer ready. She slipped the phone into her pocket, turned toward the door. "You can keep the house," she said. "It was never mine." "And where will you go?" "Wherever the signal still reaches me." He almost laughed. "You think the world is kinder out there?" "No," she said. "Just honest." Outside, the sky began to pale, the color between night and forgiveness. She walked down the marble steps, everyone echoing like punctuation. The guards didn't stop her. Perhaps they'd been told to watch, not interfere. When she reached the gate, she looked back once. Dante stood on the balcony, hands resting on the rail, face unreadable. Lightning flashed again, white over the lagoon. In that light she saw him not as power, but as loneliness sculpted into muscle and suits. A man so terrified of being abandoned that he built cages shaped like shelter. For the first time, she pitied him. She turned away before pity became forgiveness. The road outside was slick and quiet. A single taxi waited at the end of the drive, as if the city itself had sent it. She climbed in, told the driver, "Anywhere with light." He nodded, engine humming. When they passed the outer wall, her phone buzzed. A message from an unsaved number. "I would have given you the world," she typed back with shaking fingers. "I never asked for ownership. Just room to exist." Then she powered the phone off. The taxi rolled through early morning streets, puddles flashing gold beneath street lamps. Lagos was waking, vendors arranging fruit, church bells murmuring from somewhere unseen. The world hadn't changed, only she had. At a stoplight, she glanced at the reflection in the glass. Her eyes looked tired but alive. Rainlight shimmered over her skin like proof of motion. She realized the weight in her chest wasn't fear anymore. It was space. Back at the mansion, Dante watched the taxi disappear into the gray. For a long time he stood there, holding her forgotten sketchbook. On the first page she'd drawn a cracked phone screen, and beneath it, a single line. "Love that fears loss isn't love. It's ownership pretending to care." He closed the book, set it on the table beside the untouched coffee cups, and exhaled the only word he had left. Go. Lagos woke in slow color. Rain had rinsed the night into something almost tender. Puddles carried dawn like small pieces of mercy. Amara stepped out of the taxi near the lagoon bridge, shoes soaked, hair clinging to her temples. She had nowhere planned to go, only a direction that pointed away from ownership. The air smelled of fuel and frying bread. Vendors were opening stalls, shouting good-natured insults at the sky. It felt like the city had forgiven itself, and maybe it would forgive her too. She found a cheap guest house tucked between a tailor shop and a mechanic's yard. A handwritten sign read, "Rooms by day or night, no questions, perfect." The woman at the counter handed her a key that looked older than the building, a lock that turned both ways. For the first time in weeks, the sound of a latch clicking shut belonged to her. She slept until noon, dreamless. When she woke, the world was still noisy, but now it was the good kind of noise, human, messy, alive. She made tea with powdered milk, sat by the window and opened her cracked phone. It booted with stubborn loyalty. No messages. The silence wasn't threat anymore. It was peace. She scrolled through drafts and found the one she'd pinned. Her own words stared back like a friend who had waited quietly for her to return. Control wears a suit, but it's still a chain. She smiled and didn't delete it. Instead, she opened a new note. Freedom doesn't apologize for being inconvenient. That afternoon, she called Chica from a borrowed number. Her friend answered on the third ring, voice trembling between relief and fury. Amara, where have you... I'm okay. Do you know what people are saying? That you vanished. That he let me go, Amara said. Or maybe I stopped staying. Silence on the line, then a breath that sounded like forgiveness. Come home, Chica whispered. Not yet. I need to build something first. She took freelance work again. Small projects, cautious clients. Her hands shook the first time she sent an invoice under her real name, but courage often trembles at the beginning. She began sketching new art pieces, abstracts of light breaking through glass, of phones dissolving into wings. One she titled Unsent. At night, she walked the streets. Headphones in, rain on her shoulders, she started recording voice notes instead of diary, entries, narrating thoughts she'd once been too afraid to speak aloud. Maybe freedom isn't a place, she said into the recorder. Maybe it's the moment you stop, asking for permission to exist. Weeks turned to a month. Her mother's condition stabilized. The doctors spoke kindly now. Amara visited every Sunday, bringing small gifts, listening to stories about neighbors and nurses. When her mother asked how she could afford the bills, Amara simply said, "A mistake I survived paid for them." Her mother smiled, confused but content. Then one afternoon, an email arrived from an unfamiliar address. Subject, a commission request. Digital art series. Sender, DiMoretti Holdings. Her stomach tightened, but she opened it. The message was short. I've closed the Lagos house. I left your sketchbook on the table where you found yourself. Create whatever you like. I'll pay, but only if you let me see it when it's done. She stared at the screen for a long time before replying. I'll create it. You can see it when everyone else does. No private ownership. Not anymore. She hit send and felt something unclench inside her. Months later, her digital exhibition went live in a downtown gallery. The centerpiece was a looping animation of a cracked phone screen that slowly healed with every passing frame until it became a window showing open sky. Beneath it, a single caption, a text as a message, freedom as a reply. Visitors stood quietly, some smiling, some crying. A journalist asked her what inspired the piece. Amara thought of the house by the sea, the scent of rain on marble, and a man who believed keeping was caring. But she simply said, learning to stay without being owned. As the night ended and the gallery lights dimmed, her phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. You made something beautiful. I'm glad the world owns it now. She didn't reply, but she didn't delete it either. Some mistakes deserve a small memorial. Outside, Lagos shimmered in neon and rain light. She walked alone down the wet street, heels tapping a rhythm that sounded suspiciously like freedom. Vendors packed up. Music drifted from a bar across the road. Trumpet, laughter, the clatter of plates. The world had gone back to being imperfect and miraculous. She paused on the bridge and looked out at the water. The reflection of the city stretched wide and trembling, like a heart learning to breathe again. She whispered to herself, I'm not furniture. I'm not a secret. I'm here. A bus roared past, splashing her with rain. She laughed, a full, unguarded sound, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel wrong to take up space. When she reached home, she placed her cracked phone on the desk. It still worked, loyal and scarred. She didn't replace it. Some reminders deserve to stay visible. She wrote one last note before sleep. Healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering differently then. She turned off the light. The rain outside continued, its endless applause. And somewhere, beyond the noise, a woman's quiet breathing became the sound of victory. The exhibition stayed open for 3 weeks. By the last day, the crowd had thinned to a hush that suited the art. Amara walked through the space alone, watching strangers meet pieces of her life, without knowing they belonged to her. She listened to their soft conversations. Guesses, interpretations, emotions, each one a translation of her freedom. A security guard approached. "Someone left this for you." "Ma." He handed her a small parcel wrapped in plain paper, no note, no name. Inside lay her repaired phone, the one Dante had once promised to fix. The cracks were gone. The screen, immaculate. A message glowed on it, already opened, as if it had waited for her thumb. No debt, no chains. Just goodbye. For a moment she stood perfectly still. Then she smiled, not at the message, but at the fact that she felt no pull to answer. Forgiveness, she realized, didn't need an audience. That evening, she closed the gallery by herself. The city outside buzzed with horns and prayer and fried plantain, smoke. She walked through it like someone learning the choreography of ordinary life again. Each face she passed was its own story, and none belonged to her. That was the beauty of it. Near the lagoon, she found a cafe with glass doors and yellow light that spilled warmly onto the street. Inside, people laughed too loud, music leaked from someone's earbuds, and a barista argued lovingly with the espresso machine. She ordered tea and sat by the window, sketching on a napkin, 2 hands almost touching, separated by a phone screen. She titled it Missed Call. The door opened. A gust of rain-scented wind entered with a man's silhouette, tall, gray coat, familiar stillness. Her pulse tripped once but didn't run. Dante Moretti removed his hat, met her eyes through the glass. No arrogance, no claim, just a tired man who had carried too much control and finally set it down. He didn't come closer. He simply lifted a hand in greeting. She returned the gesture, small, polite human, that was all. He turned, walked into the rain, and vanished among umbrellas. No dramatic chase, no last confession. Some endings need silence to stay true. When she left the cafe, night had draped the city in reflections. She crossed the bridge she had once fled across months ago. The same river moved below, carrying the same secrets. But the air around her was new. Her phone buzzed, a notification from the gallery's social page. The text that freed me, now streaming online. Thousands of comments poured in. People writing their own stories of leaving, of healing, of learning to exist without permission. She scrolled for a while, then locked the screen. Technology had once been her chain. Now it was her messenger. The difference wasn't the device. It was the hands holding it. At home, she lit a single candle and placed the repaired phone beside the cracked one. She'd refused to throw away 2 versions of the same thing, one flawless, one honest. She chose the cracked one and switched it on. No messages waited. She opened a new chat, typed a single line, and saved it to drafts. Sometimes love arrives to teach us how to leave. She smiled, blew out the candle, and let darkness become comfort instead of threat. Outside, thunder rolled far off, gentler now, like memory instead of warning. Rain started again. Soft and faithful, Amara stood by the window, palms resting on the cool glass. Her reflection looked back without fear. She whispered, "I'm not owned." "I'm home." The lights of Lagos shimmered across the water, thousands of tiny freedoms flickering in unison. Somewhere out there, perhaps on a plane or in another city, Dante would read her name in an article about art and survival. He would know she was alive, and that would be enough. Amara turned away from the window and walked toward her desk. The blank page waited. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she began to type the opening lines of her next story. He didn't look back when he left. Maybe that was the kindest thing he ever did. She smiled at the echo. Rain tapped the rhythm of her heartbeat against the glass. Applause from the world she had finally rejoined. Weeks passed before Amara realized she no longer checked her phone out of habit. It had become what it was always meant to be, a tool, Not a tether. Some mornings she forgot it entirely, losing hours in the rhythm of creation and small joys, sketching faces at bus stops, editing late at night with rain as background music, answering messages that came from real friends, not from ghosts disguised as protectors. Life had found her again, and it spoke softly. Her exhibition's online success opened new doors, collaborations, interviews, even an offer from a small publisher to turn her pieces into a book. They wanted to call it The Text That Freed Me. She agreed, because she understood now that freedom isn't an ending. It's a story that keeps rewriting itself every day you wake up. One afternoon, she visited her mother, who was strong enough now to sit on the porch. They watched children chase paper boats down the flooded street. The rain had lost its menace. It sounded like laughter now. "You look lighter," her mother said. "Maybe I stopped carrying what wasn't mine." "Was it love?" Amara smiled faintly. "It was a lesson wearing love's clothes," they laughed, and the wind carried it toward the water. That night, she sat by her window again, the same position where everything had started. The cracked phone lay on the table, its screen dark. She traced the fracture lines with a fingertip, the way some people trace maps. Then she whispered, not to anyone in particular. "Love that asks for surrender is only fear pretending to care. Real love opens the door and waits." The candle flame bent in agreement. Outside, the city hummed, the sound of millions of stories still unfolding, still searching for their own replies. Sometimes a single message can trap you. Sometimes it can save you. But the message that truly changes your life is the one you finally send to yourself. Soft rain, fade to gold light. Moral: possession is not the same as love. Freedom is the proof of care. Sometimes silence is how the soul learns to speak.